Hi everybody, and welcome to video number 3 in the A Case of the Jills coronavirus pandemic series. Guys, today I want to talk about something that is traditionally a very serious topic, but what I want to do is I want to break it down and I want to make it more applicable to everything that we're going through right now. Today I want to talk about grief. Before you get nervous, I want to point out a few different things. The grief that I'm talking about today is grief that is not the kind that we're used to, which is associated only with death. Culturally, we're used to saying that grief is something that we feel upon the passing of a person. Today I want to talk about a different kind of grief that has to do with the loss of the things that you used to know, maybe a life that you used to live, maybe some certain values that you used to have, habits, lots of other things too. We're going to talk about all of them. As we move through this video, you'll notice that I'm going to talk in general terms about grief. I encourage you to consider how they apply to you in particular. For example, in some ways you're going to find that the things that we're talking about have to do with what we're all experiencing collectively with the coronavirus. Other things are going to be just as applicable to those of us recovering from hypothalamic amenorrhea, overtraining syndrome, or even exercise addiction. I also want to just make a disclaimer. I am absolutely not comparing illness and death associated with coronavirus with the same type of pain that we experience because we can't go for a run anymore. No one would compare those things. They are absolutely not comparable. However, my point today is to show you how we can very much grieve certain aspects of our life that we're letting go. They are very painful to us in the moment. Acknowledging our feelings about this is a great way to heal, feel better, show self-compassion, and help ourselves move forward. So without further ado, let's talk more about grief. So one important thing as we're moving through this too, you might initially kind of bristle at the term grief. You might think it's a little bit dramatic, but I would encourage you to not think of it that way. That could be just you feeling guilty about feeling really strong emotions in this time. I would encourage you not to judge yourself or others because guilt is kind of useless in this moment. It's okay to be sad and confused. There's no sadness that's better or more appropriate than others. If you're sad, you're sad. And so that's why we're going to address it. So let's talk about some facts. Any kind of loss at all can make you feel a sense of grief. It can be something like divorce or a loss of a job. It can be worrying about loved ones that you cannot be physically close to right now. You can also feel grief when you consider a loss of your regular life habits. It can also be a loss of safety. Here's a big one, and I know pretty much everyone can relate to this one. You can feel a real sense of grief when you're thinking about all the things that you had to cancel that you can't do anymore because of this pandemic. So that's things like proms and graduation and birthdays and weddings. Aw, J-Lo and A-Rod. Sorry guys. I'm sure tons of people had vacations and concerts and all kinds of things that they were planning on doing that they're not able to do anymore. That can cause a sense of grief. Also for some of us who are going through HA and OTS and exercise addiction, when you have to kind of turn away from doing all those things that you used to do before, that can also cause a very real sense of grief. You might be feeling like you're losing your athletic identity, your goals for your sport. And real talk here, a lot of us feel grief about losing a body shape or size that we used to be more comfortable with. It's really important that we don't judge these experiences. All of them are important and they mean something to us. So aside from those types of grief over loss, there's another type of grief that a lot of us are dealing with right now. It's called anticipatory grief. This is when you have an uneasiness about what the future may hold, aka, anxiety. Your brain knows that stuff is happening, but it doesn't know the outcome yet. Because of this, we lose our sense of safety. And of course, that means kind of like a baseline nervous system activation at all times. Your brain is constantly scanning and vigilant, looking for clues to the outcome. So it's also important to know that there are stages of grief that sort of help us to organize how grief works in our lives. Unfortunately, the stages do not occur in order, and you cannot necessarily expect to work through the stages in a linear fashion. Hey, that's fun. So let's talk about the stages of grief. The first stage of grief is denial. This is when you say, this is not happening, it can't happen to me. I think that we can see that our president was in this stage for quite a while. Also, for those of us in recovery, it could be I don't have a problem, nothing's wrong, it's okay that I don't get my period, I can run forever. I think we can all look at ourselves and find ways that we've been in denial before. The second stage of grief is anger. This is the one where you say, why is this happening to me? Or when it comes to coronavirus, why is it that I have to stay home? Why do we all have to be on lockdown? Why can't I do what I want? We get ornery, we get really testy. This may be the time for those of us in recovery where we start actually exercising more or maybe restricting food more. It's almost like we're rebelling against what we know is coming. The third stage of grief is bargaining. And I'm gonna be totally honest with you, this is when most of the clients that I have come and seek me out. They're usually in this stage of bargaining. This is when we are really not our best selves. We're trying to game the system, we're trying to look for hacks. If you're in recovery, this is when people say, well, I'm not gonna run less, but I'll just eat a lot of potatoes or just whatever. Or in terms of coronavirus, this is when people say things like, well, yeah, social distancing is fine, but I'm just gonna have my mom come over, or maybe just my girlfriend, or trying to find a way to kind of like push on one end and pull on the other. Yeah, P.S. this never works. The next stage of grief is sadness. It inevitably seeps in when we've gone through all the rest. And now we're at the point where we feel really bad about what's going on. We say things like, this is never gonna be over. I'll never run again. We just feel really bad about everything that's happening. Finally, after all of that, we get to a stage of acceptance. Acceptance is when we say, this is happening, this is real, we're not going back, we're moving forward. So we've acknowledged that we're in a state of grief. So what can we do now? So I'm gonna give you some practical tips. First, you have to consider what information you're exposing yourself to. I'm talking about news and press conferences. I'm talking about social media and images that you're exposing yourself to. If you're in recovery, I'm also talking about things that you might be reading. So for example, when I went through my recovery, I had to stop reading running magazines, running websites. I even canceled a bunch of my subscriptions. I was feeling so sad about having to let go of running that looking at those magazines and those websites was really only making it worse. You have to ask yourself, are you helping yourself or are you just feeding the beast of grief and anxiety in your mind? The next thing we can do is remember that anxiety and anticipation are all about what's happening in the future. So we can bring ourselves to the present to combat that. What we can do is we can ask ourselves the questions, what is good about today? What can I control right now in my immediate environment? What am I grateful for, like right here, right now? We have to take a look at immediate things that we can do just today that will help us sort of center ourselves. So maybe it's the quick little walk with your dog. Maybe it's making yourself a nice lunch. Maybe you can call a friend or wash your hair. Really anything that kind of brings you into the now. Another important coping skill is to have compassion for yourself. You need to remove the pressure to be perfect or productive. Now is not the time to put pressure on yourself for you not doing or not being able to do the things that you used to do in the same way that you were doing them. In fact, you shouldn't even put pressure on yourself to think the way you used to or feel the way you used to. It's okay if the you of today is completely different than the you of yesterday. Another way of coping with this is to express your emotions. When I was researching for this video, I read something very interesting that said that we're the first generation of people to have feelings about our feelings. And this is ridiculous, but if you're anything like me, I do this all the time. It's like, I may have a feeling, but I'm also judging myself for having those feelings. This is useless. So expressing your emotions is always a good thing. You can choose how you do that. You can talk to a friend or someone that you trust, absolutely. You can also do things like dance or sing or do something artistic that expresses your emotions. You can watch a sad movie and bawl your eyes out. I know I've done that. And hey, if all else fails, you know you can schedule a call with me and I'll be happy to listen to anything you have to say. And hey, the last stage of grief is meaning. More real talk here. None of us know what all of this means yet. Let me say that again. None of us knows what all of this means yet. And if anyone tells you they have like some magic key to the great meaning of all of this, they're lying or full of complete crap. It is absolutely 100% okay for you not to know how you're going to feel in the future, what this is all going to mean for you, and where you're going to end up, both physically and mentally. It is okay if that meaning stage takes a lot of time to get to. I am totally not there yet when it comes to coronavirus. I don't know what anything is going to be like, and I am not even mentally prepared to consider it. The reason why I decided to discuss grief today and talk about it in terms of those going through recovery and coronavirus at the same time is because it's important that we recognize that if you are going through one or the other of these on a good day, it's gonna be rough. But doing both together at the same time is a special situation. So I want you to be kind to yourself and give yourself some space to manage all of this. If you would like to schedule a call with me, you can do so. You'll see there's a link below to schedule. If you have questions, go ahead and email me at caseofthejills@gmail.com. Hey, listen, I hope you're good. I hope you're staying home and staying safe. Deep breaths. We're gonna get through this. Be well.